Hi guys, so first things first to start our stencil. So we're going to be making a vinyl stencil using our Cricut for a piece of wood that I have. So what I like to do first, and if you've seen a couple of my videos before, you know this is kind of how I like to start off any kind of wood sign or anything where I'm using vinyl and then putting it onto something. I like to start out with a shape of whatever I'm putting the vinyl on. So in this case, I'm going to be using a 24, it's like 2 feet. Really? Is it 2 feet? Let me measure this here. Yeah, 2 feet. 2 feet by about 8. It's like a piece of scrap wood I had laying around that was already painted. I just didn't know what to do with it. So my sign is going to be brown, so I just like to use this so I can make sure my dimensions are correct. So now that we have our shape here, and actually to back up a little bit, to cut a stencil, you're going to need this kind of shape anyways, so this works out perfectly, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So first things first, let's create our text box. So what I want mine to say is, I'm going to use this Wisdom font up here to say hello. So I'll leave that alone for now. I'm going to make a new text box, and I'm going to use the CRICUT American typewriter font, and I'm going to have it say pumpkin. So it's going to say hello pumpkin. So for this script font, I want to make sure all of these letters are connected. So to do that, you just click on the text, and we're going to hit ungroup over here. So now all of these letters are loose, so we can now move them together. So you're going to want to make sure you do this for any kind of script font, any kind of cursive font. And then our pumpkin down here is fine just the way it is. So now we'll start to kind of put it on our, that's way too small, put it on our stencil, so we'll see what it will look like. And I'm going to change the text color to white. So if you want to change the color of your text or the color of like this shape, all you do is highlight whatever you want to change, come up to your top left corner, and just choose a new color. The color used to be over here in the old design space, and they moved it up here. So now we can start to play around with our dimensions, how we want this to look. So no rhyme or wrong reason here. You can really do this however you'd like. I just, I don't have a rule of thumb. I just kind of know what I like, and I go from there. So it's not very good reasoning, but it is what it is. So I think that looks pretty good right there. Not too big. Oh, I forgot. So I'm going to move this real quick. I forgot, once you get your cursive text, all the letters touching, you're going to want to weld it. So now it's one piece of text. Forgot that very crucial detail. Okay, so this looks good. I'm just going to play around with some colors here to see if I want to paint it maybe a different color. I just don't think the orange really pops on this brown very well. And I'm going for like the minimalist kind of look here. So if it looks kind of simple, that's how I'm wanting this to look, is kind of like minimalist, cute, simple. So now it's just really a matter of playing around with text size, all that good stuff. I think that looks pretty cute. What do you guys think? I like it. So now that we have our dimensions right, or our what's the word I'm looking for? Proportions correct, now is where this little guy comes in handy. So if you haven't already created a square or rectangle shape, you're going to want to make one now. All you do is go over here and select the square, and you're going to want to unlock it. So there's this little lock thing down here. And if you unlock it, you can really manipulate the shape however you want. And if it's locked, you can only kind of go one way with it. So I like to always unlock it. So this shape is really going to be your stencil foundation. So remember, I had this little rectangle originally 24 by 8, but now we don't need it that huge. We really just need it big enough to apply to our board. So you want to leave yourself a little room on the edges just so you don't paint over, so you know the vinyl stencil kind of catches some of that. But this looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have our rectangle or stencil foundation how we want it, now we want to weld all of this text together just so it creates one cohesive chunk of text that we will slice out of this. If you have just one word, you don't have to worry about it, but if you have multiple like I do here, it's really important that you weld it all together. The reason is because Design Space will only let you slice out one piece of text at a time. So for example, if I wanted to slice both of these unwelded together, so right now they're separate, and I try and highlight it, my slice button does not light up. Okay, so now if I highlight all my text, so we want to highlight all of our text and click weld down here. So now it's one piece of text. So we'll put our stencil foundation back right behind it. So now to actually create the stencil, I'm just going to highlight everything, the text, the rectangle, everything, and now you can see that the slice button has lit up. So now we're going to hit slice. And basically what this is doing is it's slicing out the text out of that rectangle, creating a stencil. And these are just the extra layers that we don't need. So this is actually our stencil here ready to go. So now we can come over here to make it. And you can see this is how it's going to cut out of the vinyl that you put on your mat. So we can hit continue. So it's going to find our machine up here. And a couple of things for which kind of vinyl to use for your stencil. You can use stencil vinyl. So I know CRICUT has a stencil vinyl. Honestly, I think it's a little too strong. It's not my favorite. There's also the Oracle, what is it, 813, I believe. It's the blue stuff. I'll show you it in just a second. That stuff I really like. Or you can just use regular non-permanent vinyl as well. Really, any of those you can use and you'll be just fine. So again, to recap the options, you can use CRICUT stencil vinyl, not my favorite, disclaimer. You can use Oracle 813 blue stencil film, or you can use any non-permanent vinyl. So 631, CRICUT non-permanent, anything along those lines, you will be just fine. Okay, so today what I'm going to use for my, let's see, what am I going to use? I'm going to use the blue Oracle 813 stencil vinyl or stencil film. So for that, I like to use the vinyl setting with more pressure. There is a stencil film setting too, but I found that the vinyl plus more pressure works for me. So now that we have our setting set, I will transfer you guys over to the camera so you can see how we're going to cut this. Alright, so for our stencil, like I said, this is the blue stencil film we are going to be using today. So you just apply it to your mat with the stencil, the film side face up, just like you would with normal vinyl. And I will say that this vinyl does take, or this stencil film does take some getting used to. So the first time I started using this, I absolutely hated it because when it cuts, it kind of bubbles up like this, which I thought, you know, it was like ruining it. But really, if it bubbles up, it's totally fine. It's not a big deal, and it's definitely still usable. So if it's bubbling up while you're cutting it, don't worry. It still comes off the same, and you're still able to use it how you would normal vinyl. So do not worry about that. I wasted so much money and so much vinyl because I was freaking out that it was just like totally getting ruined. Okay, so our light is blinking up here, which means we can load our mat. And I believe I have my knife blade in here right now. Yep. So I'm just going to change my blade. So I'm just going to use my normal CRICUT blade. All right, so that's all loaded. So now we can load our, oh, and I can move these star little wheels back to where they belong. Okay, so we can load our mat. And we can cut once it starts blinking. And also I'm using the light grip blue mat. Turn this so you can see a little better. Light grip blue mat. And I'm using the 12 by 24 one just because that's how big my design is, but you can use the smaller one too if you need. So this is going to cut out of our film, and when we come back, it'll be all cut out. Alright, so now that it's all cut, we can move the machine. Alright, so now we'll just take our film off of our mat. Okay, so I'm just going to trim the edge of this just to save in case I need it another time for a small stencil. Alright, so now we are going to weed our design, and I have misplaced my weeding tool. I do not know where it is, so I'm using my tweezers to weed, but you know, you normally use your little weeding tool. So that was just the extra. So now we're going to just weed out the actual letters, so we're left with the negative space, which will create our stencil. So with this stencil film, the only thing is you just need to be careful with the like middles or like the insides of these letters, like this, the middle of this H right here. It's a little sticky, so it does tend to pull those small little insides of the letters with it. So just see like this E one right here. Just, it's kind of a pain. Okay. Just make sure it comes with it when we transfer all of this. All right, so we have the hello. So now we're gonna weed out the pumpkin. I love fall. And it's finally starting to cool down a little bit where I live, and it's like, you know, football's on. You can totally tell that the seasons are starting to change, even though I live in Southern California where there's like literally no seasons. But you can tell that, you know, the days are starting to get a little bit shorter. Fall is starting to materialize, which is so great. I love fall so much. All right, so now we have our stencil weeded. So this is ready to go. This is the piece of wood, and the paint is still not dry. I just gave it one more coat of brown paint, and all I used for this was, I know you could tell like the back is like a little whitewashed because the board was originally white. So I used this Artist Loft. This is acrylic paint. That was the original coat that was on it. And now I'm putting this brown, also acrylic paint, Craft Smart. Both of these are from Michaels. So I'm just going to let this dry, and then we will apply our stencil. You want to make sure if you're staining wood, make sure that the stain is completely dry. Like, give it at least 24 hours to totally dry, or you're going to have a really hard time getting your vinyl to stick. Same thing with acrylic paint. Just make sure it's completely dry, or you're going to it's just going to be a headache. So I'm going to let this dry completely, then we'll come back and finish it. Okay, so our board is dry, so we can apply our stencil. So what we are going to need is some transfer tape. So this is the transfer tape that I have just been loving. I will link it below. I always get questions about it. This is the tape from Auntie Tay. No, she is not my aunt. No, we're not related. That is just the surname that she goes by. She's on YouTube, obviously. Everyone knows who she is, but that is who. So she sells like vinyl and transfer tapes and a bunch of fun stuff. This video is not sponsored by her, but this is the tape that I use. It's not her brand. It is Expressions vinyl that you can see on the inside, but she does carry it. So that is where I get this from. So any transfer tape you have, you're going to want to just apply it to the stencil. So for this, I'm just going to, I think this will be the easiest way to do it. I'm just going to apply it and kind of roll out as much as I need. That is why I love this transfer tape. It's so freaking easy to work with. But any other transfer tape, you're just going to want to cut out a piece and just apply it to your stencil. So now I'm just going to smooth it all out and make sure it adheres properly. And so basically what the transfer tape does is it allows us to transfer the stencil or the vinyl from the carrier sheet that it's on onto our board without ruining the integrity of the stencil. So I like to kind of flip it over and kind of like do a reverse peel. And I mean, as you can see, this transfer tape is just taking to it so dang well. So now that we have our stencil on our transfer tape, now we will just apply it to our board. So again, I don't have a great technique for this. Sometimes I measure, sometimes I don't, but I usually get pretty lucky. Okay, just before I get it on there, I'm just gonna give it a quick measure. So that's about 4.5, and that's about 4.5, so we're good. All right, so we're just gonna scrape this down on our wood. And we're going to very gently peel up our transfer tape, and we just want to make sure we don't pull up the stencil film or cause any bubbles. I like to kind of like press and as I'm peeling. I don't know if that's an actual technique, but works for me. So now we have our stencil on here. You can see there's no bubbles. It's pretty much good to go. So I'm gonna be using, I think I'm gonna just use acrylic paint today. So just get a little bit, and this is again Artist Loft from Michaels. And so I'm gonna use this sponge brush, but honestly, I really like regular stencil brushes better, but all mine are dirty. So I'm just going to start off with a very light coat of paint, and I'm just going to kind of do a light brushing / dabbing kind of motion. I don't know what this is, but the key really to not having any bleeding is multiple light coats, not like globbing a bunch of paint on there. That is when you get, in my opinion, that's when your stencil is going to bleed. Also, you'll notice I did not Mod Podge this. If that's something that works for you, great. Mod Podging for me has like never worked. It worked like one time and then it just stopped. I don't know what I was doing wrong, but for me, I feel like if you do multiple light coats of paint, you really don't need Mod Podge. Just in my experience. So now I'm going to start doing the pumpkin. And again, just kind of lightly going over it first, and then we can go back with more paint if we want to. This is really making me want to go and get all my fall stuff out. I just have a hard time decorating when my house is not like pristinely clean. Does anybody else have that? I feel like my house needs to be like perfectly clean before I can actually start to like decorate. Maybe next weekend. All right, so we've got our first coat of paint on here. So now I'll go back with another light coat. And I put way too much paint out, but I'll go back with more light coats up top. And I'm gonna peel my stencil while it is still wet. Because it's better to peel your stencil when it's still wet, because if you let it dry for too long, you run the risk of having your paint chip or get peeled up with the stencil. Whereas if it's still a little bit damp, it's going to make it it's going to be a lot easier to pull your stencil up. And so if you want to use this as an inside sign, that would be great. If you do want to use it as an outdoor sign, I'll show you the sealer that I like to put on it. If you're doing anything with like white paint or white paint or like a really light colored paint, you have to make sure you get a water-based, whoa, way too much paint on there. A water-based sealer, not an oil-based, because it's going to turn your white paint or whatever light colored paint you have, it will turn it like yellow, or it'll give it like a kind of dingy look to it. So if you use a water-based one, I'll show you what I have. It'll be nice and clear. All right, so I'm gonna do one more coat over this top layer. And I actually really like how this brown paint turned out. It gives it kind of a stained look without actually staining it, which takes a lot of time. Well, not time to stain it, but you have to wait for it to dry, which I have no patience. So now that this is, we're done painting it, it's still a little bit damp, we can peel up our stencil. So peel it from wherever you're comfortable. And as you're peeling it, if a piece of it like sticks or it's giving you a hard time, just keep peeling. We can go back and fix it later. And see, this stencil film comes up so easy. It's like ridiculous how easy that came up. Okay. So now I'll go back with my tweezers and get out these middles. This is again where you have to be careful that you don't, so like where my hand is right now, I don't like smear this. Just be gentle, go slow, because I've done this before where I've like scratched the like letter or whatever, so just, you know, go slow. All right, so there you have it, our Hello Pumpkin sign. Super easy vinyl stencil. I hope you guys found this helpful, and happy crafting and happy almost fall.